Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Where John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the aforementioned show. It is the BJ Show. We do this show every single Monday through Friday, every weekday, 7A to 8A. Today is March 4th. It is a Tuesday. Mention that because a lot of people listen to the show on either the bjshow.co podcast or the bjshow.video vlog or vlogcast, whatever you want to call it. John Combest is the main man of the show because every single day he puts together this extensive list. How many articles on today's johncombest.com list?
Oh, I don't know. Probably 3 dozen, I'd say, Brad. You know, It just depends on what's out there. I don't make the news. I just link to it.
You're pushing 40 different things, huh? Amazing.
Yeah, you know, some days there's a lot. Some days there's a few.
Well, he takes, and I have no idea where he's going with this. Occasionally I have a good guess, and matter of fact, wasn't it yesterday that I guessed right, or was it Friday I guessed number one?
I think it was last Thursday, yeah.
Number one. Every once in a while, but most of the time I fail, as in most things I do in life. But we start off with John, and we get this guy into the studio. Again, what's your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what exactly do you do?
Now on with the countdown.
You do a countdown, huh?
And here they are.
And you start with?
In third place.
We have 3 federal stories today, Brad, and we'll start with Senator Josh Hawley. Big debates now that Republicans have 3 branches of government. Excuse me, not 3 branches of government. Now that we have the House, the Senate, and the White House as Republicans, a lot of talk about touching some of those most controversial of cuts. You know, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, entitlement spending. Josh Hawley did an interview, and it's up on the Missouri Net today. It is the very top link on my website. And Josh Hawley says that there are some things that the Senate will not touch, that Senate Republicans will not touch. And he says Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I guess we could call them the big 3. I haven't heard that before. But Brad, you and I, you and I will call it the big 3. Those 3 Senate Republicans are not going to cut. Now, the U.S. House Republicans, the conservative Republicans in the House say, whoa, we got to touch these big entitlement spendings. We got to get this stuff under control. Hawley says, not so fast. We're going to protect the big 3. A little bit of a split between Republicans here. What do you think about this?
You know, John, I go back to if our founding fathers, we found out that they were cryogenically frozen, you know, as they were getting close to death, and we unthawed them and brought them back. And we said to them, they said, well, hey, what's the government spending a lot of money on? And we said Medicaid and Medicare. And they would go, what's that? Is that national defense? Is that defending our?
Yeah.
Is that defending our borders? Is that making us safe from people who are trying to attack us? Is that? And we'd say, yeah, and a big portion of that money goes to the Park Service. Oh, the Park Service. You mean you have like parks that people can go to? Yeah, some of them are huge square mileage kind of parks. Oh, we never envisioned that. Somebody, I won't give the source. Somebody told me the other day that some amazing percentage of people in the state of Missouri are in Medicare, Medicaid, which is the Medicaid is the one where if you essentially are broke, you get Medicaid. Isn't that where it is? You have to qualify.
Yeah, I think so.
You have to have maximum amount of money that you earn. I don't know. I mean, it's frustrating to me that you see all this pushback with the government of, employees complaining about the fact that they have to say 5 things they did this week. And if you go out, if you go out in the private sector, some employers would ask you to give you 10 things what you did that day. You know what I'm saying, John? To keep
I
your
think
job.
so. Or not even. I mean, I know this is a little off topic, but not even 10 things. But if you're working on a big project, how far down the field did we push that project today?
Right. Progress report. Okay, we did this. There were 10 goals you gave us for the project. We've accomplished 7 of them so far, and we're still working on the other 3. Right? That kind of a deal, right? But,
I would think so. And so back to the original topic of this, Brad. I think that my prediction is under it, certainly these first 2 years that Trump is president, we're not going to see Social Security touched, Medicare or Medicaid touched. And frankly, I don't think Republicans broadly will touch any of those programs until the next president. I don't think Trump wants to be known as a president that allowed Social Security to be invested privately. And I think that's unfortunate. And we can tinker around the edges. And I love DOGE, and I love these DOGE stories. We might even talk about one of them in another of our top three, Brad. But I love these stories. But until you get these massive federal entitlements, to your point, Brad, until we get these massive entitlements under control, who cares why we're tinkering around the edges?
Well, the Medicare and the Medicaid thing is always, and the Social Security is always like the boogeyman that's brought up by the Dems. Oh, they're going to take away your Social Security. And all the, 85-year-old women, oh, my God, I won't be able to survive without my Social Security. That's not what they're doing. The problem is, as Elon Musk says, the problem is it's not going to they're taking away your Social Security. It's that there may not be any money for your Social Security. That's the issue, but it seems like nobody wants to address that issue. Right, John?
That's exactly right. Now, the other thing that I would point out here, too, is that the other side, so the progressives, over the years, over the last few decades, they've done such a good job. You've probably seen these bumper stickers that say things like, healthcare is a human right. Healthcare is not a government right. You don't have a right to state-sponsored healthcare. Like, at what point did we decide healthcare is a human right?
Well, as I always say, the health plan I want is the same one the congressmen and the senators and the president gets. When I drive around town, I want to have that ambulance follow me all over the place with the doctor inside. So in case like I get a toenail, a bad toenail infection or something like that, the doctor will jump out of the ambulance. Oh, Mr. Brad, let me fix that right now. That's the health care I want. But you know what? It ain't available, is it, John?
The problem with ambulances and ambulance chasers is sometimes you'll get rear-ended. But we won't get to story number one right now, Brad. We'll get to story number two.
Up a notch to number two.
Freshman Congressman Bob Onder was on the Mark Cox morning show yesterday. He touched on Zelensky versus Trump. We talked about that yesterday, Brad. I think most people have their own opinion on what happened there. You could probably predict what side of freedom and America Bob Onder was on. But also, Bob Onder talked about his immigration legislation. It is his first piece that he is sponsoring as a member of the U.S. House. And what it would do is focus on what he calls overstayers, people who overstay their visa. And I'll read you a direct quote from Congressman Onder. What this would do is the visa overstayer under Onder's bill would forfeit a substantial bond, and then they would be barred from further visa applications for at least 5 years. So Bob Onder says that his bill has teeth. And I should probably step back in that when he set this up on the interview, he talked about the fact that so many people come to the United States on visas. And if you overstay your visa, the government says, hey, you need to leave. And if you don't, so what? What happens? So Onder's point is, let's put a little bit of teeth in here. And to bring this issue close to home, literally close to home, Onder points out the fact that there was a gentleman from the Middle East who was a visa overstayer. And that is the gentleman who was charged with sexually assaulting 2 women. This is the story you and I talked about. The gentleman who was driving for both Uber and Lyft, respectively, and sexually assaulted 2 different women, according to charges. And he was a visa overstayer. So these folks are here, Brad. Some of them probably are not committing crimes, but some of them are committing crimes. Good for Bob Onder for passing something that's got a little teeth to it.
The crazy thing on that is I heard somebody the other day on talking about this, and it's funny because I do remember this. There is supposedly something in the immigration law that states that if you come to the United States, you cannot be essentially a ward of the state. You have to have like a sponsor, and you have to show that you can fiscally, not physically, but fiscally, in other words, money-wise, support yourself and not take any government aid to live. Does that sound familiar to you?
It does. Yeah, it does sound familiar. I mean, that sounds like the basis of a work visa, isn't it? Isn't that the same thing?
I think that was any kind of. I think that if you go back to the Ellis Island thing, I think that was one of the requirements that they actually asked you how you were going to, where were you going to stay, and were you able to financially support yourself until you got on your feet. I'll have to look this up because I do remember hearing something about that. And obviously the situation is where, like, take example, New York, where, they take whole hotels and the government strokes a check every month to the guy that owns the hotel. Actually, remember I told that crazy story that hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel, was actually was owned by the Pakistani government. So in other words, we're sending money to Pakistan for the immigrants. I don't know. I mean, what happened to all that stuff? And what you're talking about is, once again, this is anecdotal. I have heard people say, matter of fact, a friend of mine told me the story that he was working in England at the time, and he was working for a company, and they had work visas, and one of his coworkers' work visa expired, and like within a week, the English government was at his door essentially saying, put your stuff in your suitcases, we're taking you to the airport. And they took him to the airport and put him on a plane and sent him back to the United States. I mean, do you think that would ever happen here?
Yeah, excuse me, absolutely not. And I have some experience with Germany and dealing with American colleagues who moved to Germany. What I thought was fascinating, and I never knew this until we were acquired as Monsanto, until we were acquired by Bayer, but Germany has a trailing spouse law. So if you move and you get a visa to go work in Germany as an American and your spouse comes with you as a trailing spouse following you, they cannot get full-time work.
Really?
Yeah, because they do not want to infringe on the economy. The whole idea is that we don't want, we being Germany in this case, they don't want foreigners coming there. So, for example, I knew a wonderful woman who moved to Germany for several years to work there, and her husband came over and was la-di-da, time to go look for work. And the government's like, oh, no, you don't. And he's like, well, why don't I maybe, he was in a certain profession that he could work part-time. He's like, yeah, why don't I just teach some XYZ full-time? And they're like, oh, no, you don't. You're going to stay at home and sit in your apartment, and you're going to be a good little American, and you're not going to take one of our jobs from our German workers.
He couldn't even work part-time?
No. And you're able to get some kind of an exception where, let's say you're a music teacher. You could teach little German kids the flute and then report very clearly what kind of earnings you get, pay a ton of taxes. The idea is that they do everything they can to protect their German workforce. And in fact, when companies that are based here, for example, Bayer, if we would be eliminating any jobs in Germany, the company essentially has to show that they've done everything to eliminate as many U.S. jobs first before they take a single German job away. It's called the German Workers' Council, Brad. I got quite familiar with them in my time at the company.
Now, don't they also, like, the companies have mandatory, the government makes them give the employees like 2 months of vacation or something like that? Isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty generous. Yeah, it's pretty generous, Brad. And I bet I would know how an American like Brad Hildebrand would feel about that.
Don't go there. Okay, last but not least,
The number one.
I'm pleased to report a brand new series across the state in the Kansas City Star. And it is part of, quote, coverage of the federal firings in the Kansas City area and the human cost of government efficiency efforts. A brand new anti-DOGE series from the Kansas City Star. Today's edition is brought to us by Jonathan Shorman. He is a veteran progressive content creator at the Kansas City Star. And he went out and he found a big fat woman that worked at the IRS. And I point out the fact that she's quite hefty because in this story, we're supposed to feel a whole lot of sympathy for her. There's a whole lot of sympathy elements here that we're supposed to side with her over Elon Musk. Why would you choose a billionaire over a sweet, rotund woman? The headline, she left McDonald's for IRS job in Kansas City. Trump firings made her feel like, quote, a piece of trash, unquote. Thanks a lot, Elon Musk. You made a woman cry. You made her literally cry, according to the Jonathan Shorman story. Now, you read a little further in the story. She wasn't just a McDonald's employee. She was the general manager, and she was making pretty decent money. But whatever, let's just forget about that for now. She was a general manager, and she says one of the things that she liked most about taking this IRS job is that she didn't have to deal with the public. She could work on her own, not have to deal with any angry customers, not have to, be judged. She also pointed out that when she was general manager at McDonald's, she was held partially responsible for the efforts of the people that worked at the store, the performance of her employees. But at the IRS, all she had to do was take care of herself. And she was a probationary clerk, so she wasn't really a full-time, full-fledged employee. But thanks to Elon Musk, her job is gone, and it has made her cry. Can you imagine being the type of man that makes a woman cry? Have you ever been put in that position, Brad?
I've had women make me cry, but that's a whole other story. But okay, now hold it. She used to be a manager at McDonald's, and she quit her job at McDonald's to go work for the IRS, but she hadn't worked there long enough to become a non-probationary employee. So she'd been there under 2 years, I think. Isn't that the number, 2 years?
You're exactly right, yes.
So when they did this broad sweeping change and they essentially said all probationary employees, hasta la vista, that's what happened. Then she lost her job.
You're exactly right. You nailed that. She's been there for less than a year.
Okay.
Actually. And so, and I would also point out one of the things that she loves the most about the IRS is that she was injured in a traffic accident. She said she got rear-ended after she made a sudden stop because there was an accident in front of her and she made a sudden stop. And Brad Hildebrand, if he was there, would have immediately called 911.
I would have.
She says that she injured her back and her ankle and her wrist. And what she loves about the IRS is she got 2 weeks off and she got paid for 26 days of rehabilitation. Probably wouldn't have got that at McDonald's, Brad.
The frustrating thing on that, John, is that I told you the story that one of the quickie marts I go to and got to know the manager. And they've got a sign on the outside, telling, what amount of money. And I said to him, as a manager of a quickie mart, and let's just call it QT, so you know what I'm talking about, this particular quickie mart, I said, what can you make? And he says, I make $135,000 a year before bonuses. And I'm going no, hold on a minute now.
It's a good living. It's a great living.
Now, I've heard that certain fast food chains, I don't know about McDonald's, that if you rise to the level of a manager, you're pushing six figures. So do you think...
Oh, I absolutely believe that. So she took a big cut. But Brad, what price can you put on not having to deal with the unwashed masses?
Okay. I have to tell you a story. Once again, next break, I was listening to NPR on Saturday. And it's funny, I have someone that I tell this to from time to time, and their response is, why do you torture yourself?
Yeah, it's because you're very masochistic. Go ahead, Brad.
And their guest was Roy Wood Jr. You know who Roy Wood Jr. is?
No. Is it part of Roy Rogers' franchise?
No, he told a couple fascinating stories, and one of them had to do with working at Golden Corral. Okay, so
oh yeah, the old Golden Coral.
Yeah, so let's take a break. We'll come back in segment B, and then I need to also talk about Kathy Hochul. Have you seen the latest thing, the governor of New York? Have you seen?
Oh, what is she in the news lately?
Yes, she's in the news today.
Okay, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I want to be surprised live on the air.
Okay, it's pretty interesting what she's doing because all out. Let me just put it this way. I'll give a little tease. It's reverse DOGE as far as she's concerned. Okay.
Okay, I can't wait.